It's not often that you get to talk to a legend, and even less often when the legend also happens to be an old mate. And even less often again that you get to talk to someone who's managed to sustain a celebrated career on both sides of the Tasman. John Clarke is a satirist, an actor, a director, a writer and television presenter, and a man of letters. He still has a number of mine. He's better known to the Kiwis among us as Fred Dagg, a television icon during the mid to late 1970s, and a household name from that day to this. Fred remains one of the enduring, standout characters in the history of television comedy. John's better known to Aussies for 20 years of weekly satirical television interviews with Brian Dorr, and for The Games, which he wrote and starred in, and for a heap of movies, and most recently for a marvellous 3-part documentary series on the ABC on Australian sport. Now, David Frost once described television as a device that allows people to come into your living room who you would not have in your house. John Clarke has been a cherished fixture in our living rooms now for something like 40 years. Take a look at this.
G'day. How you doing? Haven't seen you for a while. Just turned the telly on here, shouldn't take long to warm up. I dropped the new spark plug in it the other night. She's going pretty good now. Sit down and watch this program, they reckon it's pretty good. Hang on a minute, I'll check that the aerial's alright. Got to allow for the hills from the reception here. Can't be too careful with these aerials, of course. Got a mate who ran into a bit of bother the other day with aerials. He was playing about with them without the glovey protection. They reckon he got a bolt up his arm. Not too pleasant. Anyway, sit down. I'll make you a cup of beer at half time.
Mr. Dagg, you may not want to answer this question, but yeah. I'd like you to tell me truthfully how many sheep you in fact have.
Around 2 million. Around about 2 million. My wife put them through the race the other day while I was knocking off my porridge in the morning, and she reckoned they were about 2 million.
Have you ever had time to count them? Have you done that?
I've had time, yeah, but I've never done it.
Why not?
Too busy, mate.
And the suggestion was that some people were pretending to retain some stock they didn't actually have, in order to obtain the benefit deriving therefrom. I found that very difficult to believe, and I tried to point that out.
We here retent the sheep in March, and then we retent them again in October, and if any have slipped through, then we whip out after dinner and retent them in the yard.
Mr. Dagg, I imagine this whole process must involve the payment to you of fairly substantial sums of money.
Yeah, I should imagine so, yeah.
Well, Mr. Dagg, I wonder if we could see some of these alleged sheep.
Yeah, I wonder if we could. Now, you see that hill over there?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, down in that first saddle, see that white thing? I think that's one of them. No, just a minute, that's a rock. They don't have a rock retention scheme, do they, the Gummin?
Would you mind if I made a head count?
Not at all. No, that's all right. You just jerk your slide rule up. I'll go and get you some. Hang on. I have reason to believe, that is to say I've got no reason not to believe, that I've invented a bomb of catastrophic proportions.
Could you describe your bomb? What does it look like?
Well, it looks like a bomb. I mean, a bomb's a bomb. Up the sharp end, you've got the lead, and that bit's going to hurt. Then there's, in the middle canister, there's all these chemicals and things of a highly technical nature, which I can't actually pretend to understand terribly well myself. And in the final, the last canister, there's just a whole lot of other stuff that I found around on the concrete of the milking shed after milking. And I think that last section, if everything else fails, might be a little cracker.
Where is the test area? Have you found one yet?
Well, yeah, the wife and I struggled over the Atlas last night trying to find a test area. We don't want it to be too near to New Zealand, so that the ghastly fallout and firestorms and such like don't affect the good people in New Zealand. So we've got an area a long way away from New Zealand where we won't be affected at all, and not to put too fine a point on it, France.
Senator Collins, thanks for coming in.
It's a great pleasure, thank you.
This ship that was involved in the incident off Western Australia this week...
Yeah, the one the front fell off?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not very typical. I'd like to make that point.
Well, how is it untypical?
Well, there are a lot of these ships going around the world all the time, and very seldom does anything like this happen. I just don't want people thinking that tankers aren't safe.
Was this tanker safe?
Well, I was thinking more about the other ones.
The ones that are safe?
Yeah, the ones the front doesn't fall off.
Well, if this wasn't safe, why did it have 80,000 tonnes of oil on it?
Well, I'm not saying it wasn't safe. It's just perhaps not quite as safe as some of the other ones.
Why?
Well, some of them are built so the front doesn't fall off at all.
Well, wasn't this built so the front wouldn't fall off?
Well, obviously not.
How do you know?
Well, because the front fell off and 20,000 tonnes of crude oil spilled into the sea caught fire. It's a bit of a giveaway. I just like to make the point that that is not normal.
Well, what sort of standards are these oil tankers built to?
Oh, very rigorous maritime engineering standards.
What sort of thing?
Well, the front's not supposed to fall off for a start.
And what other things?
Well, there are regulations governing the materials that they can be made of.
What materials?
Well, cardboard's out.
And?
No cardboard derivatives.
Like paper?
No paper. No string, no sellotape.
Rubber?
No, rubber's out. They've got to have a steering wheel. There's a minimum crew requirement.
What's the minimum crew?
Oh, one, I suppose.
Nice seeing you.
Now, Mr. Wilson, we've got a problem, haven't we?
Your problem, mate? That is not good.
No, this is not good at all, Mr. Wilson.
What sort of a problem?
Well, I'm right, aren't I, in assuming that you put that athletics track in?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, now, did you do this to specifications, Mr. Wilson?
Yes,
Are they the specifications there, Mr. Wilson?
yes, that's them.
Good.
Now, Mr. Wilson, have you measured the 100 metres track?
Yes, of course.
Well, let me ask you, how long is it?
How long is the 100 metres track?
Yes.
It's a 100 metres track.
Yeah, I know what it is, Mr. Wilson. I'm asking you how long it is.
It's about 100 metres.
It's about 100 metres long.
Yes.
How long should it be, Mr. Wilson?
That's about the length it should be.
Yeah, about 100 metres long. Is the 200 metres track about 200 metres long?
Well, the 200 metres track is different.
Isn't it twice as long as the 100 metres?
Well, the 200 is different.
No, you've lost us, Mr. Wilson.
Well, the 200 metres track is part of the 400 metres track.
Well, how long's the 400 metres track, Mr. Wilson?
Well, the 400 metres starts round here in the back straight, finishes up here at the finish line.
Yeah,
It's a staggered start.
No, familiar with the event itself, Mr. Wilson. What I'm trying to ascertain is, are you absolutely sure that the 200 metres track is 200 metres long?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, because it's half the 400 metres track, which is 400 metres long.
That's right. The 200 metres is half the 400 metres. You can measure it.
Yeah, no. But the 400 metres track is exactly 400 metres long, is it?
That's right.
So the 200 metres track is exactly 200 metres long.
Yes, of course.
But what you're telling me is that the 100 metres track is about 100 metres long.
Slightly different arrangement to the 100 metres track.
Is a metre a slightly different concept, is it, in 100 metres as against 200? Well, I don't understand, Mr. Wilson, quite why in the construction of a 100 metres track you would want to depart too radically from the constraints laid down for us by the conventional calibration of distance.
Well, the 100 metres track is not part of the 400 metres track. It starts way out there.
Mr. Wilson, it doesn't matter whether it's horizontal or vertical. 100 metres is 100 metres.
No two 100 metres tracks are ever the same. Everybody knows that.
Well, how long is our 100 metres track?
Look, what's the point?
The point, Mr. Wilson, is that in 739 days we're going to have the Olympic 100 metres final on that track. This is an event that'll be watched by about 600 million of the world's most dedicated rugged individualists. You and I both know it's going to be run on a track that's not 100 metres long.
How do you know that?
Mr. Wilson, do you know who is the current 100 metres all-comers Australian record holder?
No. Can I guess?
Oh, there's not much point in guessing, Mr. Wilson.
Is he an African American?
He's not an African American, no.
Is he that Canadian from Jamaica?
No, he's not a Canadian from Jamaica, no.
I give up.
The 100 metre record in this country, Mr. Wilson, is currently held by Brian.
Brian.
Yes, yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And you, Mark, Mr. Wilson, set at a blistering session last Wednesday. I wish you'd been there. We were down there and we had a bet.
Is this wind assisted?
No, and we'd had a couple, and in my view, Brian's not in quite the nick he was at the same stage of last season.
So you've measured the track?
Yeah, we've measured the track, Mr. Wilson.
So you know how long the 100 metres track is?
Yes, we do.
Okay.
How long is it, Mr. Wilson?
You know how long it is?
I want to hear you say it.
94 metres.
94 metres. 94 metres. Well, we've got a new event, haven't we, Mr. Wilson?
Ladies and gentlemen, would you welcome John Clarke?
Thank you. How do you do? Thank you for having me at your interesting conference. I've met 17 people from Palmerston North so far.
You've actually got a quite intimate connection with this audience that most people are probably unaware of, because in fact your father was in retail.
Yeah, he was. When I was a kid, my father ran at the Palmerston North branch of a chain store called Mackenzie's. There were two chain stores, chains in New Zealand, Woolworths and Mackenzie's, and the chain store fits basically in the history of retail between the general store and the supermarket. After the Depression and the war, there was a retail boom in chain stores who had enormous buying power, and they made their money not out of high markup but out of great big throughput. They sold a lot of boxes of matches. And my dad ran the Palmerston North branch. He'd left school when he was about 15 or 16 in the middle of the Depression, because you had to go and get a job. And he'd started as the sort of very junior office boy in Mackenzie's, and he, apart from going to the Second World War, where he spent a lot of time in North Africa and Italy, he worked there for much of his career, and he ended up as the merchandising manager. And he had a twin brother who ran the Rotorua shop when I was a kid, who ended up as the sales manager. So the twin Clarke boys ran the in-tray and the out-tray of this quite big retail company. And yes, I did grow up with it. Kind of retail is a way of thinking in my head that I can understand.
Did he expect you to follow in his footsteps?
No, he didn't own the company, and that was something that I looked at and thought the only thing wrong with this setup, because he was a very gifted retailer, he was a wonderful retailer, my dad, was that he didn't own the business. So he was building an asset for Roy Mackenzie, who was skiing. But retail is, I mean, I didn't look like going into the business, but there were various times when I was aware that I had something had gone into me as a kid, which enabled me to understand things at a retail. For example, when I first did a Fred Dagg record, which was in 1975, which my father looked at, didn't know anything about record business or anything, and he didn't much like me at the time. And he looked at this record and he said, "Are you bringing this out?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "It's a gift line." I said, "Is it?" He said, "Yeah, it's a gift line. And people buy that as a gift. Might work." Anyway, the EMI, who were the record company, said, "We're going to release this record." It was 1975. The cost of an album was $9.99, and we're going to release it at $9.99. And I said, "No." We hadn't signed the contract yet, and I insisted that the records sell for under $5. And they said, "That's just stupid, John. There's more money out there than you think. People won't mind paying $10. And I said, "No, I want it to cost a maximum of $5. And they said, "Well, you might as well put it straight in the bargain basement bin at the front of the shop. That's where it's going to go. You're basically saying it's not as valuable as a premium priced record." And I said, "No, I'm not saying that at all." and I'd like it to sell. But I get 1,000 letters a week, and all of them are from people under the age of 12. That's the market. It's not the market that EMI normally sells records to. And so I was a bit boring about this and insisted, and the record cost $4.99, and I remember it was released on November the 17th, 1975, and by Christmas it had sold 87,000 copies. And it was the biggest selling record in New Zealand history, and the main reason was that I knew who the audience was. I knew who the market was, and my dad was like this. He knew the people who came into his shop. He knew their business. And he would understand. His understanding of them was one of the important things he was selling.
You said that your dad didn't like you much at the time.
No.
Let me guess. He had certain ambitions for you, and you worked really hard to frustrate every ambition he had for you.
There was a little of that.
So there's an element of truth in that.
There is an element of truth in that. We were locked in a essentially Freudian struggle, perhaps, for a long time. He died a few years ago, aged 94, and we got on famously in the last few years of his life, and it ended happily. But we struggled for a couple of seasons there. We didn't ever win.
I remember Michael Parkinson telling me about his own dad. He had an interesting relationship with his dad. His dad had pushed him really hard not to go down the mine the way he had,
Yep.
but he wanted him to play cricket for Yorkshire.
Mm.
And Michael created this major, sensational career for himself. And he tells the story of going to see his dad, who was dying in the hospital in Barnsley, where he'd lived all his life, not long before the end. And he describes going into the ward and seeing his father lying there, pale, emaciated little man, and he said, "My dad opened one eye." And he said to me, "You've done well. Aye, you've done well, lad. But it's now the same as playing for Yorkshire."
No.
He said, "My dad, he knew the difference between fame and immortality."
Yes, that's right.
So your dad was reconciled in the end to the fact that although you hadn't taken the path that he might have preferred.
Yeah, I didn't know what he might prefer, though. He wasn't very articulate about that. We were just at loggerheads for a long time. But he was. I'm grateful. My parents split up, and it was a troubled sort of family in some respects. But I'm deeply grateful for choosing the parents I got. They were both very intelligent and talented, and we've survived their difficulties in good part. And our job, it seems to me, in this world is to find the pluses in the position we're in. And if we focused on the negative all the time, you can do that. But the positives in our parents were astronomical.
What did you think you were going to be when you grew up?
I had no idea.
Did you have any vocational aspirations at all?
None whatever. I went to school and university without really knowing what I wanted to do. And when I was young, I'm 105 years old, and when I was young, there weren't very many jobs. There were about 6 professions and a number of other sorts of jobs, but not lots. There was finite. And the job that I do now didn't exist. And I basically needed to bring it into existence. And I always recognised that, and I didn't care what I did in the meantime, and I wanted the meantime to be as brief as possible. So no, I never had an idea of quite how I wanted to do it. And once I embarked on this strange passage of a kind of creative endeavour, which is part retail, because you need to earn a living. I mean, I'm basically subsidising my creative development by earning some money by doing things, and But the things I do to earn money are not the things that... I mean, if you wanted to make a fortune in my business, you'd reject all the jobs I do and do all the jobs I reject. Because the money's in huge live shows and advertising. And what interests me more is the sort of capacity that having an audience provides for you to critique things and to question things and to have publicly the sort of conversations that we have privately about why things can't be better, or why is that person in that job? That seems completely strange. Who elected that person? These questions have all been okayed, have they, by Warner Brothers, incidentally?
Yes, yeah, I think so.
I have always been more interested in that, but it is a sort of, like a lot of, I mean, my job is the same as a lot of other people's jobs. I'm sure these are the variables we're all dealing with in one way and another. And I spend a lot of time at my work, and I need to like my work. And I sort of need to be a bit in charge of my work. The great lesson of my dad was that I didn't want to work for other people. I wanted to back my own judgment and make my own mistakes and fall in my own hole and clamber my own way out of it and learn.
You went to university, you were at Victoria in Wellington, and that obviously worked out okay, because it wasn't so very long ago that Victoria University bestowed an honorary doctorate on you.
They did. It was an act of great kindness, since I showed no particular inclination to get one in any other way. Going to university was really, in a sense, the beginning of my creative life. It was a time when I think there were 5,000 students at Wellington University, including part-timers. So it was, it wasn't a huge university. It was free. And I met, the day I got there, my generation, really. I met a lot of fabulously talented people who could do all sorts of things, and I'd been pretty bored at school, so I suddenly found myself doing a couple of swift laps and catching the field and thinking, this is good, this running, this is great stuff. I'd forgotten I liked this. And my extracurricular life at the university was more important than what I was studying. I enjoyed what I was studying in a way, but none of it ever struck me as being, this is what I'm going to do, because I wasn't madly interested in any of it.
Do you remember when Rob Muldoon got an honorary doctorate, I think from Victoria?
Did he get a doctorate, did he?
Yes, he did. And at question
Let's
time...
Let's critique that for a moment.
Well, I've opened the field up. At question time in Parliament, Russell Marshall leapt to his feet and congratulated the honourable member on getting his honorary doctorate, and asked whether he intended to be a full-time doctor like Dr. Goebbels, or a part-time doctor like Dr. Jekyll.
That's good, isn't it?
They came to Melbourne to give you that doctorate.
They did. They do a bit of a circuit, and they go.
Is that because you don't fly?
Well, I don't enjoy travelling in any form. I'm not about to go on a ship. I've always disliked travel, and they had invited me a few years before they wanted to give me a doctorate, which is really an act of great kindness, because I wasn't a particularly apt student, and I adored my time at the university, and it is the beginning of so many things that I've done subsequently, which I greatly value. But yeah, they go around, the universities now go around the world basically looking for money. They go around and they hold occasions in London and New York and things, and they say to all their ex-students, my word, you've done well. You don't have your checkbook with you, do you? So they don't mind. They do a bit of a join up the dots.
It was your dad's job that brought you from Palmerston North to Wellington. I remember you telling me once that going to live in London wasn't a migration experience for you.
No.
And coming to live in Melbourne, in the end, wasn't really about migrating either, that you'd had just one experience of your life of what it was like to migrate from one place to the other. And that was moving as a boy from Palmerston North to Wellington.
Yeah, well, that was a bigger change in a way because, and I can still remember it, Palmerston's flat and you're basically born on a bike. You're born with a cycle under you and your bike is your independence. It's a metaphor for your capacity to, as long as you're home by 4:30, you can do what you like. We don't care if you go to Ashurst or you go to Dannevirke, but be back here for your dinner. And Wellington was completely different. There are no bikes in Wellington, and there were then trams in Wellington, and it was a port, and the smells were different and the sounds were different, and it was the first time I think that I'd ever been somewhere and told, this is you now, and was completely different. And you need to have this vaguely Darwinian experience of adapting a bit to where you now are. And simultaneously, of course, a migration experience of any magnitude enables you and in fact encourages you to reinvent yourself a little bit. And I was about 11, and it must have been at quite a good time because basically you can go to, if you go to London and you start living in London and people say to you, what's your name? And what do? You can say, my name's Arnold and I sharpen knives. Or my name's Beryl and I knit. You can say anything, they don't care. And people often do migrate for this reason. They want to throw another 6. And I think that when I went from Palmerston North to Wellington, I sort of disappeared into Wellington. It was a bigger place, people didn't know who I was, and I think it was good for me. So I quite valued that.
When did you first realise you could make people laugh?
I don't know, but I didn't think of it as an individual thing. I remember making lots of fun with other people in my class and of the same age. And I thought, this is what we do. Palmerston North is frankly not Vienna at the turn of the century. If we're going to have a good time, it'll be because we make it happen. It'll be because we are creative and we have imagination and energy and stuff. And so we did. And it's something that I think all of us did. The people I was drawn to all did. I always appreciated that anybody else's capacity to make people laugh, and I never particularly set out to do it myself. But I was greatly amused by, when I was a kid, I was greatly amused by adults who would say funny things that weren't jokes. They would just exaggerate, and not a lot would happen in New Zealand, so that people would often be talking about essentially the same thing. They'd meet each other and they'd say stuff like, it's overcast again. And the other person would say, yes, there's no question about that. Absolutely no question about that at all. There is no doubt in my mind that cast there is over. And they'd go on and on and on because there wasn't a huge range of subject matter. So what we've got to do is to overfly this few facts very often in an imaginative and sparkly kind of way, and the best of them were just geniuses at it. I think it's a New Zealand talent, really.
I've interviewed over the years a lot of very celebrated comedians, and one of the surprising things is that for probably over 90% of them, at some point they will tell you that the ability to make people laugh and the reason that they developed that practice was because it was a kind of survival skill for them. They were